The introduction to the book. We have begun, we have conquered the preface, and we are now going to dive into the intro, and we are immediately met with some really, really good stuff. So I have this remarkable here that I'm using, and it's just got some cliff notes here, so I'll be referencing that as we dive in and talk about the introduction to The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday. So life is but overcoming obstacles, large or small. We all face them every day, every week, every month, every year, etc. But most of us are paralyzed by some form of obstacle, whether it be mental, physical, financial, spiritual, emotional, really anything under that larger umbrella of existing in life. We know the what. Generally, we know what the problem is. However, it feels like we are facing an invisible enemy. And I really like how he describes this because most of the time, if we were to talk to a best friend or a sibling on how they would handle their problems, we would be able to advise very straightforward, right? However, when we receive that advice from our spouses, our family members, our friends, we have this kind of eeriness in our gut, if you will, that is this invisible force. And it's really because we are approaching that obstacle. And obviously, most obstacles are never easy to overcome in some degree, some much more difficult than others, but there's still this kind of invisible force. I really like how he phrases that. Go into page 2. So, what do we do, right, when we're faced with the obstacle? Sometimes we do nothing. We blame our bosses, the economy, politicians, other people, or we write ourselves off as failures, or our goals are impossible, when really one thing is at fault: our attitude and our approach. So really he's coming at us with a couple haymakers right off the bat, right? We have a couple categories of people. We have those that blame, right? Something happens to them, didn't get the outcome they wanted. It was such and such's fault. Oh, such and such is always doing this. It was their fault that I didn't succeed. That's one kind of section or category of people. Number two is the people that are probably in their own minds, like myself, where they destroy themselves because they weren't perfect, they weren't performing well, they put too much pressure on themselves, whatever kind of the case is with how he was describing some of that. Write ourselves off as failures, even though that's only really a temporary experience because we didn't, let's say, conquer the specific obstacle. Or the thing that we're trying to do is so great and so cool and so intense that if we don't do it successfully, we feel like failures. And so the obstacle of that kind of dichotomy is what holds us back in the first place. And so, what he says is really what it comes down to is the attitude and the approach. And I like it because now it comes into our own hands on how we can actually control, battling these obstacles. So he then goes to say, no one ever taught us how to overcome failure, how to think about obstacles, how to treat and how to triumph over them. And so we're stuck because essentially we have these things that are coming at us in life, and we have no one, unless you had a mentor or a parent that was really good at this, that could really sit down and teach you how to overcome these things that he's talking about. So what we need is what he's offering here: a method and a framework, and understanding and appreciating and acting upon obstacles that life throws at us. So a little bit within this book, we have names such as John D. Rockefeller, Ulysses S. Grant, Margaret Thatcher, Amelia Earhart, just a lot of very famous people that have come before us on how they handled some of these things. So let me flip back here. Okay. So, kind of going off of the preface, so how we view obstacles directly correlates to living a great life. So, the more tools and resources we have, and the more often we practice this, leads to a better experience handling the obstacle, which then leads to a better quality of life. And that's the end goal, kind of like what I was talking about, is like, why even entertain this, right? Well, it's because no matter what, whether we have the tools or not, we're going to be facing obstacles. So, that's the first kind of truth. The second is, what we're trying to just really kind of blow up and enhance is our life experience. And so the more that we know how to deploy, the better we're going to be able to make it through these experiences. So here's kind of a contradictory question that he poses. So why should we entertain or even crave obstacles? So think about that. Think about the level of kind of change in vantage point there. We're here, which would be facing the obstacle, and we could be, again, like those individuals that blame others. We could get in our own minds. It could be just this invisible force, to all the way to the other spectrum of this unbelievable confidence to go, we want more obstacles to overcome, and this confidence with that. And how we can get to that point is transformation. So, great people and great companies view the obstacle or weaknesses as an opportunity to transform, like oxygen to a fire, the obstacles that fuel them. So, I love kind of the analogy of oxygen to a fire. So, as you're building this confidence, as you're building teams, as you're kind of practicing these tools, there comes this confidence and this momentum to be able to conquer obstacles, which is really, really cool, because it would suck if we weren't able to have a good mindset going into all that. Because most situations aren't horrible. Rather, they're a minor disadvantage, or we're trying to do something really, really hard, and we're outmatched or overstretched. So this is kind of a fun thing to unpack a little bit too, because most of the time, I would say, our obstacles, unless they're the bigger ones, aren't that horrible. They're just a minor disadvantage. And with that, it's just kind of this mental energy of, oh gosh, why do we have to overcome this yet again? And so that can almost be more of a pain and a pest than and really trying to do the opposite, which would be try to do something really, really hard that requires a lot of mental energy and endurance and stamina. And really, what we can kind of pull all this together in knowing is that there is a peace, knowing that there is a way through. Excuse me, let me reword that. So there, we can find peace knowing that there is a way through, and whether it is a minor inconvenience or disadvantage, or it's something really, really hard, these are what we're going to rely on to get us through. So obstacles are actually teaching you how to get where you want to go in life. Benjamin Franklin had a nice quote in the introduction here that said, "Things that are hard things that hurt instruct." So what that is really kind of driving home is that we need obstacles, because through obstacles and overcoming them, we're actually learning more about life, which then gives us that transformation to be able to be great, to be a great company, be a great leader, to start viewing these obstacles like oxygen to a fire. And then kind of rounding out the introduction here, our enemy isn't an opposing force trying to steal our land in 2023, that is. It used to be maybe that way. It's all normally internal. And so that's why it's so critical that we have a book about Obstacle is the Way, and other resources to get through obstacles, because most of the time we need to outsource our thinking and our approach to something that's going to advise and instruct to say, okay, you're facing this, this, and this. These are the 2 or 3 things that you really need to focus on. And then Ryan poses that we must find a practice or discipline to rely on when facing obstacles. This process, attitude, and approach breaks into 3 steps. And this is kind of getting into the further part of the book as we're wrapping up the introduction here. So section 1 is perception. Section 2 is action, and section 3 is will. So we're going to go to each one of those sections. There's a handful of things within that, and then we're going to continue to move forward through the book. So we will end the introduction on a quote, and that is, "The obstacle in the path becomes the path. Never forget, within every obstacle is an opportunity to improve our condition." And what a good place to leave this section. So hopefully you've had fun reading the preface and the introduction. I'm personally pretty jacked up to get into perception, and that is where we're heading next. So let's keep reading, guys.